Ding, ding.
Like if it's a good movie, has good word of mouth, well reviewed before it even comes out, whatever, it's a good movie, Brian. We know this is a good movie, it's a much anticipated movie. Let's say, for example, The Odyssey. If it was only 30 days in the theater, that is designed to maximize the return of those 30 days. Those weekends could probably be huge.
You got it.
What up, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the NerdGen Report. I'm your host, Pablo, and joining me, as always, is Mr. Brian Schultz. Part 2 of our WB Netflix discussion. We're going to get a little bit into more detail as to some of the things people have been saying, some of the groups that have been weighing in. I guess what they say, the horse's mouth speaks, and some people, listen. Some people don't. Some people don't find certain things as important. But today we're going to go through all of that and sort of get into a little bit more detail as to what this possible merger means. Brian, what do you want to get started first?
Why don't we start with the hate?
Okay.
The hate is strong. In part 1, we did talk about one of the considerations of whether this deal happens is the fact that this is one of those instances where they talk about strange bedfellows in the sense of, you have administration potentially looking to block this deal because they want everything in the hands of Paramount and the Ellison family. And you have Hollywood, which is predominantly anti-administration and ardently so, is now also on the same side of wanting to block this deal for their own reasons. And the statements coming out of the guilds has simply been vitriolic. So I'll give you a couple of the rundowns here. I got the actual statements if we need more, but the Hollywood Reporter has a good summation of this. So, the Writers Guild Association simply led with, quote, "This merger must be blocked. The world's largest streaming company swallowing one of its biggest competitors is what antitrust laws are designed to prevent. This outcome would eliminate jobs, push down wages, worsen conditions for all entertainment workers, raise prices for consumers, and reduce the volume and diversity of content for all viewers," end quote. So that's the writers. That's how they feel. Okay. The head of the Teamsters Motion Picture Division said this was a, quote, "call for alarm amid a wave of industry consolidation. Netflix is the biggest streaming service in the world. Consolidating power over the streaming video market not only kills jobs, but raises prices and hurts the U.S. entertainment industry," end quote. So there's sort of the nuts and bolts workers. And then there's the Directors Guild, which Christopher Nolan is now the president. And that's perhaps pretty notable in this, given his stance on Netflix and Theatrical. They were a little more diplomatic, but they said that the potential arrangement between Netflix and WB raises, quote, "significant concerns. And we believe that a vibrant, competitive industry, one that fosters creativity and encourages genuine competition for talent, is essential for safeguarding the careers and creative rights of directors and their teams." That union then went on to say it had arranged a meeting with Netflix to air its grievances and better understand what the streamer plans to do with the 102-year-old Warner Brothers.
I'm looking at it from a couple of different perspectives. One more particular that's, I think, important is, I don't know if we had this conversation before we got on, or that you mentioned it, but, Hollywood hasn't really been a fan of this administration.
That's an understatement.
And so the fact that, you want my help now?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? That involves a lot of, I would say, deal making.
Oh, yeah.
It starts with, like, what are you willing to give up now? Because it's not going to be a simple sort of solution or a simple extension of the hand to assist. It's going to come with a cost. So I don't know if they're prepared to do some of that stuff.
I think it's a great point. And I think it's really interesting that and I didn't give you every single quote because there's the Producers Guild. They also said they were concerned. Ironically, SAG, right, the Screen Actors Guild, actually was probably they were probably the most diplomatic. They were sort of the most TBD. And maybe that's because Netflix also provides a lot of roles for actors, right? So there's a hesitation to sort of, burn every bridge before you get to the other side of that. However, I do think it's really notable that while there has been indications out of the administration more broadly of the opposition to the deal, there's one voice that's been conspicuously silent. He's never missed an opportunity to get on socials and speak his mind, right? Rush Hour 4 being the most topical example of this in the last couple of weeks. So I think it is interesting that he has kind of bided his time here and not simply come out and blasted Netflix or blasted WB for their choices, which, to your point, makes me think he is waiting. He's waiting to extract value for playing his cards. And let's not forget, I mean, this structure of this deal, Netflix is not buying the TV channels. Remember, we know that the administration really cares about what goes on to CNN in the long run. Well, CNN is not in this deal. So CNN could still be acquired by Paramount in a separate deal later on, right? So there's a little bit of, yes, he doesn't necessarily want this deal to happen for movie and sort of TV production reasons like on HBO, but it's not necessarily killing all of his aspirations. And so I think you're right. I think he's seeing the landscape of all these people who are now arrayed against this deal who need his help. And my guess is he's thinking through okay, what's the quid pro quo here? If I go to war with Netflix, who, quite honestly, I mean, Netflix's politics, as far as we know, are definitely a little more aligned with the left in Hollywood than they are with Trump. I mean, this is not Fox, right? This is, and so forth. So I think it's going to be really interesting because you're right. There's no free lunch here. No free lunch, especially not in this case. And it's yeah. So I do think there's going to be these conversations of okay, before I block, before I sue, before I encourage my people to sue and do everything possible to break this up, what kind of programming am I getting on the other side? What is the tone of that programming? What are your management and hiring and, practices look like? And what messages do you want to be putting in, to the kids program? I think all of that stuff starts to come into play, and that becomes really interesting as a slippery slope for, how this goes.
It's called discovery. What's happening and how can we take advantage of it, or I take advantage of it? So I'm pretty sure there's going to be some of that, but I'm sure he's relishing in that you guys want me to help, and that is, I'd say, man, let's go to Plan B because I don't want to deal with Plan A.
And he's going to be doing the opposite with Netflix, right? Because Netflix is going to be wanting to get this deal approved. So he's going to be sitting there saying, okay, you want me to support this deal and not sue to block it? What are you going to give me? What in the content are you going to give me to facilitate that? I mean, in some ways, you could argue this is his dream situation because he has so many interests now needing his help. As I said, the linear TV part is not even part of this. So there's still he could still get his objective of, CNN becoming a different type of channel, right? So it's all, in a weird way has lined up for them. Potentially. They're still going to want to say in the content. We know that. They're not going to just sit by and be like Netflix and WB can do their own thing willy-nilly, right? So in order to drag them through the mud, but ultimately give them approval, there's going to be conditions. Absolutely.
I was thinking about this situation, and I think we can probably talk about it later, but what sort of, because we talked about in our first part, DC Comics, actual books and stuff like that. I still think, like you said, I think also there are some still possibilities that things may not just end up all at Netflix. There are some things that could still occur One of it, which I think it makes more sense to me. Like I said, I think I said this in one of our shows. If I were Amazon, my number one concern is to get DC. DC Comics would perfectly, because they sell books and they sell, you know what I'm saying? They can perhaps innovate on how they distribute their books and their comics and stuff like that. So there's a lot of possibilities there for Amazon to sort of come in and say to Netflix, yo, you got a problem with DC Comics, or you guys don't know how to really approach this? We could take this off your hand for about 15 billion, if 20, whatever it is. A conversation can be had to probably settle, subdue those concerns that Netflix may have in terms of how they handle DC.
Well, I think the physical media question is, as we use DC Comics because it's the most topical to us, but if you think about it, Netflix has never been in the business of making Blu-rays or physical copies of anything they produced. Everything they do has been about getting away from that, right? And forcing you into the ecosystem of their app. And so I think a lot of, you have to think about it. And from Hollywood's perspective, there's always been money, royalties, audience that's been grown through physical media, right? Even now, there's still people who consume it that way and they value the production of that. So DC Comics, to me, is the ultimate test case of physical media and how Netflix views that, because they're almost certainly over time going to look at non-DC movies as, well, why do they need a physical form? It works just fine for us that they don't. The difference with DC is this potential synergy between what is in the pages and what kind of content you can build off of that.
Yeah.
That's why there is a world where Netflix could justify keeping something just like DC going, because they look at it as an incubator for what's going to be on the service. And rather than having and waiting for the next director or writer to come to them and say, hey, I have this original Batman idea, they can kind of look at it as, we have a constant think tank going for these characters, right? In these arcs and like when we see something, or when another director sees something in those materials, in those pages that inspires them, that drives the thing that goes on our service. And that's actually worth it to us over time. I think that will be the real test of how black and white they are about being digital and only digital. Because they've already muddied the waters, right? Because they're in a studio which has not just physical media, but has a big commitment to theatrical and all this other stuff. So yeah, I think this will be a real test of their own black and white strategies and whether they want to grow. We think they might want to grow in certain ways, and we'll get to that in this show as well in more detail. But I think for the purposes of this show, last show, we spent all the time talking about kind of like the what ifs of, does this deal happen, right? And if it does or it doesn't, what does that broad strokes mean? I think for this show, we really want to focus on, let's assume Netflix wins. Let's assume this deal goes through. Let's assume it is completed roughly basically in the form that they've proposed. Then what?
Sword of Omens, give me sight beyond sight.
Let's imagine DC and the DCU as a Netflix entity. Let's imagine what actually does happen to theatrical, or what Netflix may do with the movie and television experience that we haven't thought about before. So all of this will assume this deal gets completed, and completed roughly on time.
Yeah. Because right now people are sort of reacting to the possibilities and sort of making their disdain for what's to come known. When I look at, do you want to move forward to the implications for Netflix and WB Theatrical?
Do you want to do theatrical first? We can do that, sure.
So a lot of the stuff that I've been reading and hearing is about the theatrical window and how they look to perhaps change that. It all makes sense. Like, you watch a Netflix released movie in the theaters, 30 days later or however long they decide to have that that window
Yep.
available, goes right to Netflix. Hey, that's a member right there that's going to want to perhaps
Yep.
do that and subscribe so that they can see the movies that perhaps they couldn't see within that window, or because they wanted to wait. But I think it also, like, if it's a good movie, has good word of mouth, well reviewed before it even comes out, whatever, it's a good movie, Brian. We know this is a good movie, it's a much anticipated movie. Let's say, for example, The Odyssey. If it was only 30 days in the theater, that is designed to maximize the return of those 30 days. Those weekends could probably be huge.
You got it.
Because everybody needs a ticket, and is not available. And there's going to be those to which I think Netflix desires most in terms of their members to want is to sit home and watch Netflix and just wait. I don't want to go to the theaters. I'll just wait. But then there are those, obviously, that camp that wants to go to the theaters to see that, to see it or experience that in the theaters. But those weekends, if the movie is dope, could be huge. Is that sort of the idea Netflix has for their sort of plan?
Well, 10,000%. It's at the centerpiece. And the way I think about it is, I want to premise this whole discussion with a potentially sacrilegious comment to Hollywood. Hollywood is basically defending the status quo. If you look at everything they're saying, basically the reason they hate this deal is because they don't want to be like the end of Rocky IV.
Everybody should change.
So the question is, and the question we should be, adjudicating is, how much of this should change? Because let's be honest, how many articles have you seen about the struggles of movie theaters already? How many articles have you seen about the struggles of studios and what movies they can make and green light and all the complaints about, hey, all the money goes to superheroes and I can't get the indie drama made. Like, my point is simply that let's not pretend like the Hollywood machine is humming like the 96 Bulls. There's a lot of problems here. So the question is change all bad in this case if the change is inevitable? And what sorts of changes over time for the consumer might not be the worst thing? So let's take your first example, and I'll give you the Ted Sarandos quote from the transcript, which I think is aimed right at this. And this quote matters more than anything in the press release. I don't want to, so many people are just reading lines from the press release and being like, well, this is what they say they're going to do. And I'm like, do you guys have any familiarity with how a merger works? You promise everything up front, and then you do whatever the hell you want once that thing is approved.
You got it.
Don't believe them. Don't trust them. They are dying. Let them die.
This is all window dressing
to
the public.
Yeah.
Netflix, to me, now that they're potentially in possession of WB, you know what that is? That's leverage. That's leverage against the theatrical community. Their biggest weakness as a studio has been they have not produced a high enough volume of premium theatrical, premium movie content that theaters actually would have cared to have anyway. Think about it. How many movies that are Netflix originals have you watched where you're like, damn, that was a $500 million global box movie waiting to happen? You almost never say that. You look at it and you're like, this is cool that this got made at all. And it's cool that it's on Netflix, but you're not sitting there most of the time being like, man, I wish I could have been in the big screen to see that on IMAX. You're not, because they don't try to do that. But now they would own a studio that has been around 100 years that produces, on average, over 25% of box office receipts every year. I mean, that's negotiating power. Now you pick up a phone and, that's why I say you the Fifth Element clip.
Anybody else want to negotiate?
Because they got all the heavies behind them. And that's what this is about. So when Sarandos gives you this quote, this is everything. Because he got asked on the merger call about, are you really going to honor theatrical? And they are going to honor the existing contracts because they have to. They don't have a choice. But here's the quote. And this is hilarious on multiple fronts. Ted Sarandos. So a reminder, we release about 30 films into theaters this year. So it sounds like we have this opposition to movies in the theaters, but my pushback has been mostly in the fact of long, exclusive windows.
Don't trust them.
Which we don't really think of that consumer friendly. But when we talk about keeping HBO operating largely as it is, it also includes their output movie deal with Warner Brothers, which includes the life cycle that starts in the movie theater, which we are going to continue to support. But I don't, and I wouldn't look at this as a change in approach for Netflix movies or for Warner movies, because I think over time, the windows will evolve to be much more consumer friendly to meet the audience where they are quicker. All things we would like to do, end quote.
Don't trust them.
He's telling you what he's going to do for real. He's going to lean on the theaters as hard as he can. He's going to, for movies they put out beyond the existing contracts, they absolutely would send the next Batman movie to the theater, but it might only be there for 30 days. It might only be there for 17 days. And then they might run simultaneous day and date with Netflix. And he's going to keep doing that. Why? Because he's going to say, I am the only place on this planet you can get a Batman movie. I'm the only place you can get a Harry Potter movie. You want my movie or not? AMC, who won't show my stuff now? You want to sit this out? You want nothing? No revenues from a Justice League movie? Take your 30 days and like it. That's what he's going to do.
It produces the opportunity for weekend box office to, especially if a rumored film is high on the priority and on the minds of individuals who seen it and have spread the word, critics, all that, whatever, for huge box offices. And then after that, the only place you can go watch it is on, and it's beautiful, I think.
So you know what I actually think will be really interesting? Because I think once this starts to happen, I think what Hollywood is rightly wary of, and not wary of, but is accepting of, is if he's able to use Warner Brothers as the Trojan horse to effectively shrink their theatrical windows, at some point, most other places are going to follow. That's the, so then my question would be, you just need to think about box office very differently. And that's part of what I want to talk about here. That Avatar record might stand for a long time because I don't know that the theatrical capacity is going to be there to make $3 billion in 30 days. It may not be enough seats. It might not be able to charge enough. But I don't think they look at box office in terms of total gross dollars. They look at it as the efficiency of return. So they would say a movie makes a third to a half of its total box office run in the first weekend, if it's a blockbuster. So by the end of week 3 or 4, it's probably made 90% of what it's going to make anyway.
Yeah.
So I'm going to make more money putting the next new thing in its place, even if the total dollars will be a little bit less.
And people are still going to the movies.
I think their view is we're going to increase the velocity of cinema and we'll find out what sticks. But in doing that, we're actually improving the return profile of what we're doing. Not necessarily the gross, but the returns. And I think there's other interesting things they can do that other people can't, that I don't think are being considered here about the math of making money on movies. But you're absolutely on it, which is these event movies are going to be event movies that they're in control of. Now, other studios, it'll take a while, right? Like Nolan's over at Universal making The Odyssey. The Odyssey's not going to follow that, right? Not a movie like that in the next cycle. The next Nolan movie is not going to be like that. It's still going to have a long tail. I also think Netflix will remain open to individual negotiation for longer windows, right? Like if Chris Nolan comes to Netflix and says, I want to make a movie with Netflix WB, but my condition is I need 90 days. My guess is he can probably get that. He might have to give up something else to get that. But my guess is he could get that. So they probably will do these one-off. Actually, we just saw it. Greta Gerwig with this Narnia movie that's being made at Netflix, and she forced an IMAX window for that movie, and Netflix is giving her that. What they got from her in return, we don't know. Like maybe Netflix was like, okay, you're going to make 3 more projects for us that go right to streaming, and now we've got Greta Gerwig's talent, right? So there's as everything, there's nothing that's free in this world, but I think there are things here where if I went to the consumer blind and I said, I'm going to increase your movie choice in the theater 3-fold because I'm going to go from 90 days to 30 days. And you're going to have more types of movies and more event movies coming your way over the course of the year than you do now. Would you want that? Not knowing any of the details, I think most people would say yes. So that's where it goes to the question of like, is Hollywood dying on the wrong hill in some ways? Because if Netflix changes this part of the model, could it actually be better for the consumer because they have more things to go see? And when they get fired up, it actually makes it a bigger deal to get there early. And you get those portal scene reactions on YouTube, for more projects because of that.
I feel like Al Pacino in The Devil's Advocate, when he was talking to Keanu Reeves, and he kept saying to him, "What did I say? I said," and I feel the same way. I said, "Listen, Netflix is on the precipice of innovation to change something that has been going on for centuries, right?" I don't say, Brian, that they are wrong for thinking the way they're thinking and doing the things that they want to do. I just think their approach to movies is the thing that people are most afraid of, and how they think about content and the creation of it, the freedom of it. They look at it as analytics. Shout out to Robert Meyer Burnett, who often his perspective is well taken when he says stuff, and he spoke about, Netflix is all about analytics. And I think that's the perspective that Netflix may have, according to the people who are opposed to this, that they don't see it that way.
It's the Moneyball moment.
Adapt or die.
It's the Moneyball moment for movies, in theory. Because like I said, I just gave you an example of like thinking about box office differently, thinking about it as an ROI, not as, can I break some record? So I'll give you another example where I think Netflix could be really differentiated. And Sarandos said, but I think he gave an incomplete answer, so I'm speculating here. He said they would not change the amount of dollars they're putting into content on either side of the house. So like the amount of money they spend on Netflix originals and shows, and the budget that Warner Brothers was spending and HBO was spending on their content, he said would not change. So people immediately got real curious about like, well, how are you going to save all this money if you're actually going to spend the same on stuff? I actually think there's a world that he spends more, and here's why.
Okay.
Because, so for 2 reasons. Number one is when you make a blockbuster movie now, you typically will budget $200 to $250 million for the production of that movie. And then you will usually budget about half of that for the marketing of that movie. So you have the huge red carpet, you have the huge press tour, you spend $125 million on ads, and then the movie goes to the 4,000 screens. Okay. But now Netflix and HBO combined will be reaching 400 to 500 million homes. And the consumption of Netflix is kind of a daily ritual for a lot of people. They're on it a bunch. How much does it cost them to put ads for a movie on the Netflix service for their existing subs? $0.
That was the point I'm trying to make that you made.
$0.
You're not going to call. I think you probably. I don't even think you.
I think I said it
on
to you
the show.
off the air, actually.
Yeah.
I think I said it to you off the air because I wanted to talk about it here because I said,
Yes.
okay, Netflix will not do, in my opinion, large worldwide press tours. They won't bother because they're going to say, the efficiency of advertising is, yeah, we got to pay for our Super Bowl ad. We still got to do that. But our members will see it every time they open the app. Maybe we'll even throw in a 30-second ad before whatever they click in because we want them to know this thing is out there. Well, guess what I just did? I saved maybe $75 to $100 million off of my cost base. So now think about the profitability threshold for a movie. That just got a lot easier.
That box office, it means more.
I don't need $1 billion to make money on DC or Marvel anymore. I can do it with, 500. So right there is a thing where you're like, it might change the formula. And we're talking about across Hollywood, budgets are coming down because box office is coming down. And it's just like, well, what if Netflix's budgets were flat to up because they didn't have to spend as much money on advertising? Now they're the ones making potentially a superior product, offering superior pay. I'm just saying these are things that could happen that don't currently happen.
Yeah.
Because existing studios don't have the avenue of communication to a worldwide audience the way this app does.
No.
So that's number one. Number two, I got to bring this up too.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, Netflix, because it aggregates the content of everyone else in addition to its own, but specifically, let's talk about things like DC, Harry Potter. You see them come onto Netflix, right? And then they're there for however long, then they rotate off. Leaving soon, recently added, right? You see that in your queue. Netflix is paying. They're paying WB every time they have those shows and movies on their service. All of that's going to go away. That's why the IP library matters so much, because now everything that Warner Brothers controls, Netflix has forever. And they're saying Netflix has never licensed their stuff to anyone else. So that gives them a huge amount of control as a platform, because if you want to see DC content, there could be only one place you could go to see it, and that would be Netflix. Or
Highlander.
Or
Mm-hmm.
Netflix decides, you know what? This licensing thing is kind of 100% ROI for us a little bit. So maybe we do feed a little bit of it out. And now we've got a revenue stream on our side of the house that we never had before, because we never had the IP that was really coveted in the way that WB IP will be coveted. Either way, that type of either control / additional revenue opens up possibilities to spend elsewhere, opens up possibilities to do more with the content elsewhere. Again, these are things that have not been contemplated previously.
Shout out to John Campea, because he's done this quite a few times, with regards to explaining the formula surrounding movies and the profitability and the money that's being made with it. Mm-hmm. Netflix is simplifying the hell out of it. Mm-hmm. They're looking at perhaps their understanding of it. Mm-hmm. What can we eliminate so that this is just a smooth flowing stream and there's not a lot of complication?
Netflix economics also, I think, in terms of a movie are going to be a little different, because they understand their own. See, this is where the money ball really comes in. There are so many programs on Netflix that have become what they are because of Netflix, meaning they might have been good programming initially, but they never found the traction of the audience on their home service. Where they were found was on Netflix, right? All these Kim's Convenience, Schitt's Creek, Suits, exactly. These shows that got a second life. And that's why I brought up in the comic book world, like Madam Web and Aquaman 2 have been like huge hits for Netflix.
Oh, that is whack.
Really?
Yes, they've been like top 10 viewing movies for quite a while. That's why they held on to them longer. So I'm just saying that like Netflix understands that there's a place for a bad movie on their service that is more valuable than a movie that goes to the theaters and bombs. So there is this aspect of when they're looking at how much did we make on even a bad Batman movie, they're looking at that back end of, yeah, it may be a bad Batman movie, but if we keep it in-house and it's the only place to see it, that's still going to mean a few people subscribe, or I can charge my membership maybe a little bit more if I got a bunch of those to get access to that. So again, it's a little different for them because of that.
This is very, very interesting stuff for Netflix and for the movie business. And I would say, I mean, I know people hate the word content. I know the Broccoli family does. if, for some people who don't know what that means, look it up. It's a content-rich platform. And I think them having all these possibilities for them, where this is the place for you to see this. This is the place for you to watch this also.
Mm-hmm.
This is the place to see something you've never seen before, never heard of before, and like it, and be recommended more stuff. I got to go back to our videos where we talked about Netflix and all this stuff leading up to this, because I don't know how extensively we talked about Netflix being the front runner. But I do think we discussed their interest in it. We didn't know how quickly it would turn.
Right.
We didn't get anything from Amazon. We didn't get anything from Apple, but it's still time for them to sort of.
Oh, yeah. That's why I think people need to recognize this is not over.
You just don't turn it off.
Like until it's approved, until the shareholders vote it through.
Nothing is over. Nothing.
There's nothing preventing that, right? If Amazon wanted to come in tomorrow and say $40 a share, there's nothing that prevents them from doing that. It's called a hostile. You just go straight to the shareholders. And Paramount's already saying they're going to. Because they're saying, we already offered $30 up front, $30 up front, mostly cash. That's more than what you took. I mean, they can raise that to $35. That's why Netflix, if they win this, is probably going to wind up paying more than they've paid already. That's usually how this goes. But yeah, no, I do not rule out the possibility that someone else comes in now, especially seeing the fallout from the guilds, right? That someone comes in and tries to align themselves and say, like, we are the champion of the guilds. We're here to help, and we're going to offer a bit more money to sweeten the pot. I mean, absolutely could happen. Absolutely could happen. This is so that we're not talking about that here, but that absolutely could happen. Look, the last piece of the theatrical is the obvious one. It's never been more interesting to us, I think, than what's about to happen.
Prediction?
Yes, prediction.
And that's Netflix buying some theaters, because there's too many screens right now as it is, and theaters are struggling. So when, we sit around and we say this is a point of leverage and negotiation, I mean, look, Netflix will be very happy to bring some of the theatrical community to its knees. And then if they ever entertain the notion of having this exclusive amusement park for theatrical in Netflix land, they can basically be like, when some of these theaters are failing and smaller chains are failing, they can say, we're your final solution.
That's just too easy. Too easy. Too easy. No. Too easy.
We're not going to pay you for that, basically a lot. We're not paying a premium for that because you need us to survive. But absolutely. It's never, we talk about monetization and efficiency. That's what this is about. If Netflix thinks there's efficiency and economy in taking over small chains of theaters and making them Netflix only now that they have this WB content, you best believe they're going to do it.
Adapt or die.
What do you think? Because movies come from creators. Netflix having WB, does it automatically equate to them having still access to those creators and those creators?
Not necessarily. So IP, yes. Humans, no. Like this is a great point. Why don't we just make the segue? And let's use Ryan Coogler as the most, maybe a very high profile example of this.
Mm-hmm.
This would have been really interesting if Chris Nolan was still at WB, but Ryan Coogler's never made a Netflix movie. He is in the category of filmmaker that has refused for the obvious reason, which is they don't support full theatrical to his liking. He is someone that on the surface absolutely would not be supporting this deal and not wanting to work with a combined entity ever again.
Mm-hmm.
Like, for sure. Like, they would have to prove to him and give him guarantees of all sorts. And I'm sure it kind of annoys him that they're going to control the Sinners IP for the next 24 years before he gets it back. So Netflix will, and there are a number of people out there who don't do direct business with Netflix because of the way they do business, but do business with WB because of the legacy way in which WB does business. Absolutely. That is an enormous chasm that Netflix has to traverse and solve.
Does Netflix had to have the Ted DiBiase sort of approach?
Just like each and every one of you has your price. Everybody's got a price.
This is why I say that Netflix will leave itself open for the individual negotiation on theatrical and control. There'll always be, to my mind, a different set of rules for certain people. I find it hard to believe that. I find it hard to believe that if they controlled something, they controlled a piece of IP that a Christopher Nolan, Steven Spielberg, Ryan Coogler, Joe Kosinski, like that type of director wanted to make. I find it hard to believe that Netflix wouldn't bend its own rules to get that project ultimately on their service. But there would have to be a lot of fence mending with those people who tend to view Netflix, at arm's length at all times for the things they've done over the past, 10, 20 years. But as I said, once change starts, I use the Moneyball analogy. Look at the way baseball is played today, for better or for worse. When the Oakland A's and some of the early Moneyball teams started doing what they were doing, there were still 20 some odd other teams that didn't play that way. They didn't analyze players that way. Look at the game today. Everyone uses some version of that analysis. How successful, how much money they spend, what avenues they find. Sure, that creates the imbalance and who wins and who loses. But the approach, right? Baseball became so commoditized where people were swinging for the fences and striking out every single at bat. They changed the rules. They changed the rules of the game to try to make the game different. So my point is, once the change started, it eventually sucked every member of the sport into a similar avenue. I find it hard to believe that Hollywood will be different if this deal goes through, because they're too powerful as a combined entity not to suck in more people at the margin, in which case it becomes, you can champion theatrical and then you strike that deal with Netflix to make sure you preserve theatrical. But the idea that you can ignore them and never work with them and never not acknowledge their existence if they own Warner Brothers ever again seems far-fetched and short-sighted to me.
Again, there's a lot of opportunities here for Netflix to sort of sweeten deals with individual creators. It's not unheard of and we've seen this before with actors or directors getting some sort of incentive from the box office, right?
Oh, yeah.
So all these things.
Scarlett Johansson, by the way, we're not doing a news show, but rumor is she's taking a very small upfront salary to be in the Batman Part 2 because she wants points. She wants max points on the back end of that movie. Why do you think she wants that? She knows.
But here's the thing. Netflix, because of all this extra money that they could be possibly making at the box office, there's room for that negotiation and that incentive. Hey, remember when we used to pay $150 million or $100 million to do promotion? There's $150 million or $100 million available to negotiate for you if you make this movie.
I think the interesting thing, if you really start to play out this point, if the dam gets broken on, if Netflix buys theaters, if we wind up being right that this somewhere down the road they actually buy some theaters and they make them Netflix exclusive or Netflix WB exclusive, why wouldn't other studios look to do something similar? The issue for me would be the independent theater might be what's at risk, because if you're Universal, you already got theme parks. Why wouldn't you have cinema parks? Why wouldn't you use your content, right, in the same way? And as Amazon becomes its own studio, why wouldn't Amazon, which already does physical and grocery with Whole Foods, why wouldn't they do the same with movies? I think I could see a world where it's you're no longer going to AMC or whatever, brand as much, but you're kind of saying like, I'm going to the Netflix theater, my local Netflix theater this weekend. I'm going to my Universal theater this weekend. I'm going to my Paramount theater this weekend. That would be a different vision of Hollywood than we have now. And I don't know if that's always great for the consumer, but I'm simply putting it out there as don't think it's impossible if Netflix was to break the ice and do something like that. Because there's definitely money in it for them. Like if you don't have to, think about it this way, if you don't have to share box office with the theater itself because you own the theater, you just doubled your take. Doubled. How many things can you do that will instantly increase your revenue intake on a movie by 100%?
More money, more money, more money.
That's what it is. More money to do stuff and to go the Ted DiBiase route. Everybody's got a price. How much we have this available? How do we approach incentivizing whatever to move forward?
And what it means is, in order to justify having those physical locations running every day, what do you need? Content. There is a line somewhere
And
where
good
you're
food.
producing enough and you control enough to where the math makes sense. And I guarantee somebody at Netflix is doing that analysis or has already done it.
Yeah.
So you want to segue to the content in DC?
Yeah.
Because I have a take on the James Gunn situation that I
Okay.
thought about. Door number 3. It's like a national treasure. Nick Cage is on the aircraft carrier. He's like, I found door number 3 and I'm taking it. So door number 1 has been James Gunn stays, right? And Bloomberg actually reported his contract goes a little longer than we thought. So it's spring of 27 is what they're saying, not fall of 26. Really doesn't matter in the context of our discussion. The deal will still be in the middle of getting approved.
Mm-hmm.
But there's always been the James Gunn, does he stay? James Gunn, does he go? I think you introduced the one variable of like, does his role get split? I'm going to throw one other one at you. How about it doesn't matter if he stays or goes? Because the way that Netflix is going to oversee and run business means he's kind of not really going to be in control anyway.
Yeah.
Because we've thought about him staying or going as a tonal thing, right? If he stays, the DCU has this James Gunn style to it. And if he goes, some people are like, bring back the Snyderverse, put someone else in charge. But the point is like the tone will change, the style will change.
Yeah.
I'm positing that even if he stays, Netflix doesn't give a crap about his tone or his sensibilities. They're going to be looking at the metrics. And if stuff like Peacemaker Season 2 doesn't do business, and if stuff like Superman doesn't make the numbers they think it should make, they will force change because they simply like, look, the audience isn't where it should be. Change it.
I mean, that's their MO.
That is what they have done. That's what everything we're talking about here is look at what Netflix has done and how they run their IP. They don't care.
They cancel good stuff, but the metrics tell the tale.
Because they say that the returns are diminishing. That's their argument. Why run another 3 seasons of a TV show just because it's been good when we can run a new show and get more people to watch it? That's ruthless, and I understand why Hollywood doesn't like that, because there is this like, yeah, you should let people kind of enjoy and have the emotional attachment to the things they love. And Netflix is pure analytic. They're just looking at the numbers.
Mm-hmm.
So this is what I mean. It's like they would look at Peacemaker Season 2 and be like, they would watch that audience fall off and they'd be like, no effing way is there a Peacemaker Season 3. Or if there is, someone else is going to run it and change how it's made. Like that's all they would say. So I don't see any way where even if James Gunn stays, he will have nearly the influence on DC output that he does now.
Interesting situation. To borrow from one of the greatest, timeless movies.
It is also tradition that times must and always do change, my friend.
And this is that moment. This is that moment of change.
This is the most
Things will not be the same after this.
No. So let's talk about what a Netflix run, and make no mistake, this is going to be a Netflix run DC would look like. Because even if they have people that have the title who are still working on a Warner Brothers lot, Netflix is going to be the owner of the IP, which means they are going to have their say in what you see. Ted Sarandos. This quote has not been picked up by anywhere else. It is in the transcript, and I think it's critical for this entire discussion. So look, on the IP, you should think about ways you can explore all of these IP universes beyond just making tentpole movies. Let me repeat that. You should think about ways you can explore all of these IP universes beyond just making tentpole movies. You can see we have had success in digging deep into bigger pools of IP, doing the spin-off. I mean, a good example would be prior to Wednesday, the Addams Family probably didn't carry much value for MGM. I think that we have the ability to unlock storytelling and build worlds out of existing IP in ways that are difficult to imagine today. That's what we're really excited about. And examples, this is notable, folks, would be some of the earlier moves from the DC universe, like Penguin turned into great television. I think the opportunities are limitless, end quote. That's the roadmap for how Netflix would run DC. It's right there. Now, whether you like it or not, that is what they are. And the fact that he singles out a Matt Reeves TV show, by the way, I think is really interesting if you're looking at the James Gunn conversation. But look, you and I got to have this discussion because I know you're not going to like all this. But he's clearly telling you it isn't just about building these pillars of a Batman movie and a Superman movie, right? The pillars, the Zaslav pillars. It's not about that. He's the guy that would say, Matt Reeves, Penguin was great. Gotham PD, yes. Arkham, yes. And you know what? Batman's in all those series. We don't hold him for the movies. Why? Because we own him. The only place where you can see Batman is on Netflix. So why the hell would we hold him back? He's everywhere. The Batman TV series is 100% happening. 100% happening.
They have total control as to what they put on their platform. And I've always said that Batman on the TV show to do a show on his journey and like on a day in the life of Batman, live action, sort of like Batman the Animated Series brought to life.
That's the correct analogy. And they would also say that didn't prevent Batman from starring in a bunch of animated films. The fact that we had that series.
Yeah.
And he was in Justice League series. And he was in Justice League movies, like animated, I'm talking about.
Yeah. And spin-offs, not spin-offs, but remakes galore.
Yeah, Aztec Batman, Ninja Batman, like all the stuff that they did, right? There is no such thing in the Netflix world as too much of any one character. There is not. Yeah. And that's what he's saying, right? Digging deep into the IP. Now, my question for you is, I do think Netflix has no track record of a cinematic universe of any kind. He is talking about flooding the zone with Batman this and Batman that, but not necessarily building all of that toward one event. That's never been the Netflix way.
Yeah.
So I know what your take is on it. How detrimental do you think it will ultimately be to the DC audience if the Netflix approach is you've got multiple Batman shows, multiple Superman shows, you got a Justice League show, you've got the occasional movie, but they might all be separate. They might be different creators, different versions, different storylines. It's all running at the same time, but it's all in this one service that you can watch.
I mean, it presents itself with a lot of curiosity, not necessarily excitement for that possibility. But it's still watch hours. It still feeds the metrics that they want to see.
Yeah.
I personally wouldn't want to see that. I've always thought of the possibility of transferring TV to movies and seeing how the storytelling of what's happening in the TV story and where it leads. Does it lead towards a movie that people are actually... Does it lead towards a movie that people actually want to go see because of what's happened in these series?
Yeah.
Again, this Stranger Things thing that we've been watching.
Absolutely.
And seeing what happens there. And does that Stranger Things, is the finale going to be shown in the theaters or?
Correct. Only the finale.
Okay.
But it hits it hits the big screen the second it hits the service. So you can't front run you can't front run the big screen experience by watching Netflix. You either choose one or the other.
That's a huge experiment,
Yep.
That's a huge experiment that I welcome, sort of.
Well, that's what I'm saying. When I see this for DC, I'm like, you don't think they're going to do that? Like if they if someone adapts The Long Halloween and all of a sudden that thing is in the top 10 every single week and the audience is like K-pop Demon Hunter size, and they're like, hey, we're going to send the finale of that to the big screen. You're not going to show up? That's not going to be a big deal?
Imagine Game of Thrones, the last episode, in theaters.
This is what we said. Yeah. So that's a weird wrinkle in this thought of, actually there's a quote in a Bloomberg article over the weekend, which I don't disagree with, where James Gunn is basically saying, like, as they're thinking about DCU Batman, they're like, he says, like, well, if you're going to make a Batman movie now, he's like, that Batman movie better be effing awesome. Like, I agree, like, with that mentality, obviously. But weirdly, the Netflix cheat code in some ways could be, we get to assess which version of Batman and which story of Batman audiences really gravitate to by launching it as a TV series on the service. And then if we already know it's a massive audience, we can send it to the big screen for the finale. That's definitely a different take on how to do this versus, hey, let's listen to the pitch from Zack Snyder, or listen to the pitch from Tim Burton, or listen to the pitch from Matt Reeves and decide whether that is a big event in and of itself. So my concern would simply be how it's shot. Like, I do think when you're shooting something like a Batman movie, you want it to be cinematic.
Yeah, certainly.
So if it's shot with a TV series in mind, I'm already going to be a little concerned that, like, just sending it to the big screen because you have the audience, will it look the way Nolan's Dark Knight looked when it was in IMAX? And you don't want to lose that either. The question is, will Netflix build some of these with that in mind? Like, will they shoot and produce some of these with that idea of, like, hey, if you build it and they come, then we'll give you the big screen for the ending, and it'll feel just as cinematic as any Batman movie has up to date.
Mm.
But I see a very high probability here that you will have multiple Batman, multiple Supermen, multiple Wonder Women. And I just, that's why I say, like, I just don't think, like, James Gunn is going to be really the steward of, or the gatekeeper for a lot of that, because he's going to be under so much pressure every time something works or doesn't work to do more or less of that, to where it's almost like he is the manager of the Oakland A's in 2001, where it's like, yeah, he's the manager, but the strings
thinking
are
about
being
stuff you don't want to think about. James Gunn he would be put in a position to think about stuff he doesn't want to think about. He just wants to create his stuff. And yeah, we got WB, but we don't got necessarily now the personnel. But again, everybody has a price. If they want to stick around, you know what I'm saying? Whatever the case may be. If they choose to stay, fantastic. If they choose not to, here's where the boom happens with regards to, for example, A24. You'll have a lot more of those.
Yes. That exists.
You know what I'm saying?
You're saying that just exist, whatever format. Yes. Agreed.
Yes. You will have a lot, that pool of people, those teams that have worked together on films, they can be like, yo, let's go make our own stuff. Let's start this on, you know what I'm saying? So this is a very interesting situation here. And we're going to see that play out within the next 2 to 3 years to see. When the next 2 to 3 years, we'll see how things unfold. But moving forward after that, we're going to hear different studios or different production houses. We're still going to get an explosion of content from multiple sources. Where they end up, that's how this sort of moves forward with content and where it's put in. Netflix, we already know what Netflix is going to do, but what are these other people going to do?
Yeah.
You know?
I think there's more things we haven't thought about. I mean, Netflix, I think, like I said, what's clear is that Netflix thought of WB not just as an IP. They thought of it as a leverage tactic on theaters. They thought of it so they are thinking of it as an asset on different avenues, right? They saw this as, we can make a quantum leap in the changing of the experience that we want. I mean, Netflix is doing stuff with sports, right? We know that. They've done some boxing, right? And they've done some I think, wrestling. So, like, keep an eye on that. Netflix has dabbled in video games, right? There's all these things where, like, I think at the end of the day, you have to look at it as the governing principle is returns, efficiency, and making sure that everyone in the world has to subscribe to our app and live in our ecosystem to get entertainment. Like that, if you're like trying to put the through line to all this, it's like if you can say I've got something that checks all those boxes, Netflix is probably going to want to do that. But I just think it's going to be a very different experience for comic book fans. Mm-hmm. Some good, some bad. That's why I don't know what the right answer is. Like, I've always said, wouldn't it be great if they took a lot of the DC animated movies that we loved and just turned them into live action? I could certainly see that as more realistic than ever, that Netflix would want that to drive audience.
They could look to see what's popular, what do people love.
And we've also said, why don't they do Marvel or DC? Why don't they simply look at the famous comic arcs and just do self-contained series or movies of just those arcs and don't treat it as like it's got to touch everything up? I think more than ever that looks possible to me. But I think if you really want to live in the, hey, I want to build over 10 years to the Avengers Endgame moment, that to me is not what Netflix has done. And I don't know if they're going to be willing to do that again, when the metrics might say along the way, well, things were going great, but then this movie stunk, and like people didn't like this, people didn't like that, and so let's do less of that. I just don't think they're as much into the nostalgia and the emotion of it. They really are just into the bottom line and kind of the monopolization. I know that'll be a big word, but like the control over getting you to just live on their service and watch.
Yeah. Anything else, Brian, before we wrap this up?
No, I would love to see people's reaction to this idea of what a DCU, where it's, you've got all these different options, but it's not necessarily interconnected. And, whether James Gunn stays or goes, that there may not be a true head of DC anymore, that it may be just governed by the powers that be and the audience that comes. But then the idea of, TV series that go to the theaters and, all sorts of different things that we've seen. How do people feel about the idea of maybe seeing that? Because I think that last Sarandos quote is everything.
Yeah. Please remember to hit that like button. I don't really, as much YouTube that I watch, I don't ever say that. Really, we never say, yo, hit that like button, hit that. We say that at the end of the show because we want to sort of we just want to have a conversation and let people sort of listen to the possibilities, what's going on, the curious things that pique our interest and perhaps yours, and ask questions that people may not be asking, and seeing things that people are not necessarily seeing. So I think it's important for us to think about those things. And again, to support this channel, all you got to do is hit that like button. I know it's currency now, that like button. I ain't hit that like button for what? But you know how it is. We ask for it so that we can continue doing this show. And we're going to do this anyway because we like talking about this stuff. Because to me, it doesn't matter. But we want to reach as many people and have as many conversations as possible. So please remember to hit that like and subscribe, share with your friends, hit that notification bell for when we do release stuff. We release stuff probably 2-3 times a week, perhaps twice this week. I don't know. Maybe I'll do the Baker's team. I still got to edit that.
Yeah. Okay.
I want to do that possibly for right before Christmas and stuff like that, when people are just chilling. And we did get a request, Brian, to talk about the X-Men.
I saw that, which we've been talking about already. We've been saving that and working on it, and yes, we'll be doing that.
So we got X-Men, Thundercats. We did the Baker's team. But yeah, let us know what you think about what's been going on with Netflix and this WB thing. Certainly is a very important moment. And it will bring change. What kind of change? Well, that's what we're talking about. That's what we're speculating on. And we're speculating based on the entities that are involved and how they move. And again, what makes sense. If you haven't heard it anywhere else, you've heard it here first on the NerdGen Report.